Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes podcast.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and we're coming to you with our review of possibly the most anticipated movie of the year, if not the decade, Tony. I mean, it's right up there with Star Wars.
Like, have people really been anticipating a Superman movie for a decade?
Batman fighting Superman? Are you freaking serious? Yes, they've been anticipating that forever.
Maybe I just don't pay enough attention to DC to really to really understand that sort of hype.
I mean, people have been wanting this forever. It's not like they've been well, it seems like they've been advertising it forever because it was supposed to come out like 2 years ago. Finally, it's coming out now. But this, I mean, sort of quote unquote based on the Dark Knight Returns saga by Frank Miller. This comic book storyline is one of the most beloved that has not been made into a movie. Batman and Superman haven't even ever been in a movie before.
That is kind of surprising. Like, I'm surprised that didn't happen in like the Christopher Reeve era, but it's probably all licensing issues.
It's all owned by DC and Warner Brothers. They have the least licensing issues ever. It's all under one company. Anyway, regardless, they've been advertising the heck out of this thing. It's finally here. We're finally at it. And Tony, it did not live up to the hype for me personally.
For a lot of people, it did. A lot of people, it didn't. It's so divisive so far. I spent like a half hour earlier today just reading what people on Twitter had to say. A lot last night too. Didn't work for a lot of critics. Worked for a lot of people. I had people in my theater simultaneously giving a standing ovation while also having people call it very, very nasty things.
They weren't the same people, were they? They weren't like standing up like, you suck!
No. It was different groups. It was divided in there. I'm in the middle. I honestly, I'd give the movie like a 7.5. So it's not like it's anything. It's a journeyman effort. It's nothing that's going to be remembered in 20 years. But it's not nearly as bad as people are saying it is. Although Warner Brothers Ledger might be. I was reading that it's going to take about $800 million to recoup all the money spent on this movie if you count advertising and everything else. That's
not that surprising to me in this era. And also, I'm not 100% sure that's impossible for this film to do.
Yeah, it could still crush it on the international markets, and I'm sure it's going to crush this weekend.
It's just, for me, it was so... People are going to say it was too dark, Tony. They're going to say, oh, it failed because they tried to do the dark and gritty thing. The dark and gritty thing is not the problem with this movie. The Nolan films were dark, and they were gritty, and they were good, Tony, because you cared about Batman, you cared about the characters. They did things that made sense for them within this world. For me, I never got a sense of who anybody was. Superman spends the whole movie angsting about whether or not he should be a hero. And there's no, we don't see him do something heroic that ends up backfiring because of the thing that he did. Lex Luthor kind of sets him up with the most convoluted plan ever to make people think that Superman shot people or something. There's a lot of convoluted stuff in this movie.
They kind of set it up a little bit with the whole legless thing where it's like the buildings were brought down and it crushed that one guy's legs. And those are the regrettable things that happened because of Superman. But also,
Superman never met that guy.
Yeah. Well, he did for a moment in the most effective scene of the entire movie, but we'll get to that in a minute.
It was just, it didn't feel like anything, his conflict between whether I should be a hero or not didn't feel real. Nobody in this movie felt like a human being person, except for maybe Wonder Woman, and she's not a human being. Granted, yes, I know, Superman's an alien. Okay, humanoid. I get that. But he doesn't feel like a real character. He doesn't feel like somebody who has motivations or drives or anything. He's just sort of floundering his way through this story, doing whatever the plot says he needs to do. And Batman's the same way, only he's dark and gritty, Tony. He has guns in this movie and he kills people because he doesn't care anymore.
Yeah, but the guns that he was using was also in a dream sequence. That was post-apocalyptic.
He used guns 8 times. He has guns on his car. He has guns on his jet. He has a gun that he shoots a tracking device with. He grabs somebody else's gun and shoots people.
It's just like in Batman the Nolan version, the guns just looked a little bit weird. Like he had the gun that shot explosives. He had the gun that shot like trackers and stuff there too.
It's not the guns exactly, Tony, although it is the guns, but he straight up kills people. He just straight up, there's no way. Like,
and
50 henchmen didn't die directly because of his actions in this movie.
And in all honesty, that's a severe improvement on Batman.
Listen, I have tooted the horn of the Flashpoint paradox forever. The animated DC movie where the Flash goes to a different universe and it's Batman's dad and he's crazy and he uses guns. And I think that version of Batman's great. If you're going to go with crazy version of Batman that uses guns, make him a crazy version of Batman that uses guns. Don't just be like, you know what Batman needs to be? He needs to just not care and use guns and stuff. It needs to have
but he never grabbed a revolver and shot somebody. He just beat people to death.
Why, Tony? Why did he do that? We get no story behind.
Because he was saving Superman's mom.
You're straying dangerously close to spoilers here. And I don't want to spoil too many specifics of this movie. We are talking about it in the general sense. And if you want to know, as we always say, if you're watching this and you want to know absolutely nothing, you're watching the wrong review. But I just didn't.
Like, you can't say that scene wasn't awesome. Like, the scene where he's in the warehouse just beating the living crap out of those thugs. And, like, that entire fight sequence was awesome. But that's one of the things that Zack Snyder's always done well.
Tony, I need him to be a character. That's the problem. There's so many awesome things in this movie. This movie's packed with awesome things that don't mean anything.
He was probably the most focused character other than Wonder Woman, though. Like, you knew what what he wanted to do from the beginning of the movie.
Yes, you did. He wanted to do exactly the same thing that Lex Luthor wanted to do, and Lex Luthor is ostensibly a crazy person. And I gotta say, but Jesse Eisenberg is going to get a lot of flack for the way he played Lex Luthor in this movie.
That's one of the things I expected to be complaining about today. I expected to be like, man, that was the worst miscasting I've seen in a long time. It really turned out to be all right.
I had a problem with Lex Luthor, but I don't think it was Jesse Eisenberg's fault. I think Jesse Eisenberg looked at that script and the just complete insanity that comes out of that character's mouth and realized that there was no way to put him in anything like a logical framework. He had to be some kind of psychomaniacal, weird, crazy, tick-infested, not literally like that kind of tick, not the ticks that bite you. Anyway, that was the only way to play him and have him make any kind of sense, because otherwise he doesn't make any kind of sense. He's just going around spouting like junior high philosophy like he's so...
But you kind of expect that from like some spoiled brat.
I didn't want him to be a spoiled brat. I wanted him to have some kind of thing that I could follow for why he hates Superman, besides he's an alien and I hate my dad and you're a god and I don't like God and God can't be good. Why didn't you stop my dad from beating me, Superman? Lame. I didn't like it.
Yeah, I can tell. Like, you took this movie too seriously, is what it comes down to.
No. I laughed like every 5 minutes at this movie because of how seriously it took itself. From the very first line, you understand this movie is like, we're so serious about Batman and Superman. Oh my gosh, we're the most serious thing ever. And I once I understood that that's what they were going for, I was like, oh man, I'm going to have fun. And I did, because every line of dialogue is some grandiose, like, bridge to nowhere statements. Every single time somebody gets up and they're not just giving somebody else information, it's these huge, sweeping, like, we have drama! Drama! And they're just screaming, like, they're basically screaming drama at you. Like, no, we still don't care about the character. You expect me to care about these people just because they're Batman and they're Superman and I know who those people are. But you don't, in the context of this movie, give me anything to work with. In my opinion.
I don't know. It's hard for me to counter because I just cared about them because they were Batman and Superman, and I just really hate Superman and I really love Batman. So,
well, from what I can tell, Zack Snyder also hates Superman. So,
well, it's well deserved. Like Superman is the worst character that's been put
don't
out in
make
the
a
comic for
freaking movie
decades.
about Superman then. Well, I don't. I'm not sure. I want to be a good person.
There's gotta be something that could make Superman interesting. They've just never found it.
They have found it. It was the 1970s version of Superman, or whenever that movie came out. That was a good version of Superman, Tony. That was a Superman who, like, believed in his core values, who believed in doing the right thing, who wouldn't ask himself, should I save those people or not? He would say yes. And if you said, what about the unintended consequences? He would say, the consequences of doing the right thing right now are what I'm going to deal with. The unintended consequences will come later, and I'll deal with them later. That's what that Superman would have said.
And it's not like he spent much time actually thinking about that. Like, he saw a news report for something happening in Juarez. He flew out immediately. He quit tracking Bruce Wayne just for that. So it's not like he really lost those values.
But but that's what I'm saying. They go through all this stuff. They have Pa Kent to him appear in a pointless vision to tell him about some horses that he drowned when he was 5, and you're supposed to be like, whoa, man. Don't get me started on the dream sequences in this movie. Because
that was one thing I will agree with you on. I felt like you can buy one dream sequence in a movie, not 5 or 6, and some that are ambiguous if the things are actually happening.
Well, and the thing was, that scene, again, show us Superman doing something and letting it, not in the previous movie. I mean, I understand that in the previous movie, he had to fight with Zod and there was a lot of people that got hurt. But in the context of this film, we never see him looking at the destruction or thinking about, it's all theoretical for him. He doesn't do a specific thing and have another bad thing specifically happen because of it that he caused. If you're going to go with that angle, you got to show us that Superman has this fear and that it's a legitimate fear. And I did not think they did enough of that.
Like, how would you have showed it? Like, would you go back and have like a building collapse because he does something wrong? Like, how would you show it? Just curious.
That thing that you mentioned in Juarez, right? It's just there to show him being the good guy. And holy crap, to have another he's Jesus Christ image in the film, because there weren't enough of those, Tony. I needed at least 10 more.
Well, nobody's ever said that Zack Snyder.
That's really why I'm giving it a bad review. He does that thing too. He's not like, here you go, I'm glad you guys are safe or anything. He's like, I'm Superman. Here's your child that I've saved. I'm Superman. Here I come flying into your house that's almost underwater. Act like a person. That's all I want.
But he's not a person. And yes, I'm trying to drudge up an argument about Ex Machina just to throw Al off his game.
I don't care. No, don't even get me there. And then, hold on. I have notes about this. I'm going to pull up my notes, Tony. You talk about it. You say what you thought about the movie.
Essentially, I think that it doesn't deserve all the bashing that it's getting from critics. I think that calling it anything less than a 7 does a disservice to it. There are definite plot holes. There are too many dream sequences. There are times where, like, I just really wish that Lois Lane was dead. There are times where, like, I really wish that they could just focus more on Batman because it's more fun to watch that. But I also felt like the editing was a little bit choppy. I felt like the graphics were pretty awesome, but they showed too much in the trailer, so I already knew who the big turn was at the end, like what was going to, like, I can't even get into it because it's too spoilery. People might not have seen that trailer. Like, I don't know. I thought that the final fight between him and Batman was a little bit too short. Like, I'm going to agree with you there, by the way. That was something I was going to mention as well, is the movie's called Batman v Superman. That means against. That means fighting. And you have a 2.5-hour movie, and you have 5 minutes of them fighting. Yeah, like 10 if you're getting generous.
Yeah, maybe. And, okay, this is a big problem that I had. Major problem. Because I went into this movie thoroughly expecting to be a film between two people because of opposing ideals, because they couldn't see eye to eye, because their sets of morality were so diametrically opposed that they brought themselves to this point. But it's not that. And I'm not going to spoil specifically what it is, but it is...
You're talking more like the Civil War conflict that's coming between, like, Iron Man and Captain America.
Yeah, I wanted that to be it. The possibility is there. Clearly, they have diametrically opposed views on how they should act, and Superman thinks that Batman should work under the law, although he doesn't really work under the law, but whatever.
Yeah, I thought that was a little bit forced. It's like Superman's smart enough to know that like vigilanteism isn't anything he has any ground to talk on.
But it just like that wasn't how that fight happened. That fight happened because one person coerced another person into going and fighting. I mean, it might as well have been a mind control scene, and there's no stakes there. It almost feels like a fight that didn't actually have to happen, except for the fact that we put Batman v Superman in the title. So, man, I guess
Superman tried to stop it from happening too, and
he could have just like, and this gets into a little bit of the nitpicking of like Man of Steel. People was like, why didn't he just turn Zod's head a different way or something? If he's, but he could have just held Batman down and been like, I'm going to talk to you and you're going to listen. And we're going to figure this out. But no, he's like, fine, you want to fight? We're going to fight, even though he clearly doesn't intend to kill him for some of it. And the fighting actually was fine, other than a few weird things that Batman can do with a rope that just seemed, I mean, the choreography was great. I didn't have a problem with that. And
the exoskeleton was awesome.
Yeah, it looked cool. Although there was a lot of editing issues where Batman turns that bat light on because Superman at one point tells him, if they turn on your bat light, don't come. And so you clearly know that he's turning it on so Superman will show up and be like, why'd you show up? But Superman's off doing his own thing. He doesn't even care about the bat light until somebody else is like, you better go fight Batman. And Batman, he gets there like 10 minutes later in the movie, and you can just imagine that Batman's just been standing there for like all night long waiting, like playing Tetris on his phone or something. Like, he's going to get here eventually. I know it. He said not to go to the signal when I turned it on, and I came to the signal when he turned it on.
It's like, I couldn't tell if the entire suit was like battery powered or not, but I imagine that he was probably watching that as he's just waiting.
It's like, he better get here soon.
I actually wasn't clear on that, if that was an exoskeleton and in that it would make him stronger, or if it was just shielding.
Like, there were many things that were not clear in this movie. However, I have been ragging, have been criticizing. I want to say this movie's beautiful. Okay, cinematographically speaking, the every frame of painting guys should love this movie, because almost every shot in this movie is, you could print it out and put it on your wall, and man, that looks good. They all look great. Zack Snyder nailed the visuals, but it felt so empty to me. And I think
thought about halfway through that, like, man, he would be like the best director of photography like ever. If you could just get him to do that for your movie and have someone who's like a full-on competent director do it.
I gotta say, are we gonna get the Bat Workout DVD? Because that was one of those scenes in the movie where I couldn't stop. Like, they just cut to, Batman decides, I'm gonna fight Superman. And so he goes into a giant workout montage, and I just wanted the Rocky music to start playing from Rocky 4.
They definitely got Ben Affleck jacked for this role, though.
I mean, there was a lot of fan service for the ladies in that sequence. It just seemed so over the top. Everything in this movie was over the top in a hilarious way. I think that there are people who will really enjoy this, and I encourage them to enjoy it, because you shouldn't feel bad about that. Maybe eventually you won't enjoy it again, but if you care at all about like the plot, there's so many things that just, that moment when Lois Lane throws that thing in the water only to be like, well, they did that thing again. I'm going to go back and get it now. Everything with Lois Lane, for that matter. Lois Lane doesn't need to be in this movie. She accomplishes nothing at all.
The only good thing we got out of her was that short fan service moment where she's naked at the beginning.
Yeah, but she's under the water. Like,
yeah, but still.
Okay, still.
I'm saying that's better than her other scenes.
This is 2.5 hour movie, Tony, and she has 30 minutes at least of chasing down this bullet, which is this weird rabbit trail of a plot hole, or not plot hole, but she's looking for this bullet from this incident that happened in the desert where Superman shows up, and they're trying to frame Superman for some bad stuff. And eventually, like, gets traced back to Lex Luthor. Giant woo, guys. I don't know if you knew this, but Lex Luthor is the bad guy in this movie. So spoilers there. It gets traced back to Lex Luthor, whose plan, it's not like she finds out something and it's like, oh, I better do something. I better trigger my plan. His plan's already in action. He's already going to do everything. She's just spinning her wheels, running around, chasing this bullet for something that does not matter to the plot. Everything she does doesn't matter to the plot. The way the movie concluded, again, not to spoil specifically what happened, but the person who was carrying the thing to do the other thing was the one person that didn't need to be doing that in that battle. No more specifics on that, but it was again, so many things just happening for the sake of, well, it was written down in the script, so that's what we're going to do, guys. I don't know why.
Yeah, it definitely could have used a few minutes of trimming. I wonder what the 3-hour director's cut version that's going to be rated R is.
Yeah, there's a longer cut. There's more stuff that they're like, well, we don't need this. That's the worst part. Here's probably the biggest, and I think the thing that's going to catch the most flack in the long run. There is a huge moment in this movie, a huge pivotal plot-changing moment where the plot turns on the fact that two characters know people who have the same first name.
Was that retconned? Like, was that both their names in the comics? I could never remember.
I think it was. But it was I don't want to spoil it because I mean, it's almost ludicrous to think about, but it's this ridiculous moment. No, I'm not going to say it, but I want to make fun of it so bad. And I think in going down in history, that moment of one person looking up at the other or down at the other person and be like, you know somebody who has that name? I know somebody who has that name too. Let's be friends. That's going to be a thing. That's
yeah, if this wasn't going out live, I wish we could say it. Anyway, also I want to say a quick shout out to Kevin TV, Game Hunter, and Joe who are in the chat chatting it up. We haven't been able to follow this because there's a lot to talk about with this movie.
If you guys have any questions, by the way, please feel free to shoot them our way. You guys in the live chat, we'll try to answer without spoiling as much as we can. I will mention there, they talk about, and this has been brought up before, and you mentioned it, there's that dream sequence, which you've kind of seen in the trailers, where Batman's in that weird future world where the dragonfly people are flying around, and he ends up shooting stuff, and he has that cool bat outfit, and you really,
like
honestly,
the rugged desert bat.
I think that's the movie. The reason that scene is in the movie, Tony, I firmly believe, is because that's the movie they really wanted to make. And that's the movie they should have made. Because that's a movie where Batman is crazy, and Batman does shoot people, because that's where he's at.
In that situation, it was like so desperate that he would have to survive that situation.
Yeah, and you buy that Batman because that's not our Batman, but this is our Batman, and so it feels like a little bit of a betrayal for them to just be like, he just doesn't care about people's lives anymore.
They put a lot of like the build up behind that about how like all heroes eventually turn bad and everything. So I feel like they were kind of hinting at that with how far he was willing to go for all of this, like how unhinged he was starting to get, and he was starting to not be the good guy anymore. It just wasn't as well handled as it could have been.
I wanted more. I wanted, cut out all the stupid Lois Lane stuff and give me just a scene telling me why Batman doesn't, other than just expositing in the Batcave, well, we've had a hard life, haven't we, Alfred? Yep, used to be. People suck, don't they? Yep. Okay. Moving on to me killing people now.
And the killing, like, a lot of it is just straight up, like, incidental contact where, like, he just hits people really, really, really hard.
Yeah, I mean, granted, except for the dream sequence, he's not like he goes and he shoots anybody directly in the face. He
shoots up some cars.
Run over them and mow them down with the Gatling gun on the front of the Batmobile.
He'll attach a Dodge Charger to the back of the Batmobile and drag it around, rolling the people inside of it 30 times.
They're fine, Tony. I'm sure that Dodge Charger has an excellent safety rating, as does the vehicle that Batman drove in the beginning of the film, which is definitely a vehicle that a billionaire playboy would drive.
Well, he just grabbed that off the docks. I don't even think that was supposed to be his vehicle. It had sirens on it, or it had lights on it.
Okay.
Truth be told, I wouldn't mind a matte black Jeep Renegade.
Was that a Jeep Renegade? That's an ugly Jeep Renegade. I love the Jeep Renegade.
That's the brand new Jeep Renegade.
No, the Renegade. I was thinking the Wrangler. The Wrangler's awesome.
Wranglers are awesome. Yeah, and I would especially go matte black. Put a Batman thing on the back tire. Yeah,
no, it's Matt Murdock, Tony. He's in a different show.
A show
talking about Batman v Superman.
It's another show that you don't like because of the darkness, but that the darkness.
I don't okay, but I'm not dissing. I'm saying that's a personal opinion thing. That's just saying this is okay show, but it's not for me. But I really have some problems with the story in this one. But I wanted it to be good because there's a lot of cool stuff. They just shoehorn the Dawn of Justice as a clip show in the middle of the movie that Wonder Woman looks at, which was, again, what? You're just going to have her open up a bunch of files and be like, there's Aquaman, there's Cyborg, there's the Flash. Okay.
I don't know enough about Cyborg. I had to look that up whenever I got home to actually know anything about him.
Yeah.
It was a convenient way to show their origin stories without having to show origin stories.
Just to wrap it up, this is a movie in which the most effective scene in the movie revolves around a jar of pee. And it's a super effective scene.
Yeah, it's one of the few scenes where you could actually see, like, what we were talking about earlier, the unintended repercussions of him even being around people.
I love when it's almost comic, again, like many things in this movie. I don't think it's unhinged because it's just like, cuts to the jar of pee, cuts to her face. Cuts to the jar of pee, cuts to her face. Cuts to the jar of pee, cuts to her face. And she's like, having, like, more and more.
Yeah, she's trying to give, like, she's trying to give like a Senate committee hearing and like just is staring at the bottle of pee, not talking.
Kevin TV just pitched us a better version of this movie. He says, like Superman and Batman were fighting and Joker got out of jail and got really powerful and Superman and Batman had to team up. There you go. That would have been a better movie.
That's probably what's going to happen in the next one.
They didn't even... yeah, I will say...
Suicide Squad still looks like it's going to be a little more coherent, but I have no idea at this point.
I have some amount of confidence in that because I know David Ayer. He directed End of Watch, which I liked.
That was a good movie. Like I did not know he was the director.
He directed Fury, which I didn't see, but I've heard great things about. So I think, from what I know, he seems like the right kind of guy for DC because he seems like a great director who really trends towards that darker sensibility that they seem to be going for, which is fine. Again, that's how you want to define your universe and set yourself apart by being the darker guys. I'm all for that. But he seems like he has a better handle on story, and I'm fingers crossed. I'm hoping.
I think a lot of it's the use of subtlety, and Zack Snyder's never been good at that. He has no nuance. It's either like black or white to him.
I think Zack Snyder needs to stick to directly adapting things that he loves because Watchmen is still an amazing movie. And looking back on that, I realized that it's an amazing movie because the nuance of the characters was there in the original material.
Yeah, that was straight up Alan Moore building that more than him.
And I'm not sure he understood that nuance, but he liked it enough to just port it over. And that's my problem. I don't fully believe that he understands these characters.
Yeah, it could be that. Like, it could be the way I look at these characters where it's not realistic to be beating people's faces in all the time and not have some casualties. Like, it could be more my view on it, but...
I believe it's unrealistic, but I think I like the idea of these people with ideals, and it seems like that's offensive to Zack Snyder's way of thinking, that he doesn't like the idea of superheroes with ideals, that he would rather see superheroes that are disillusioned and hate the world. And despite all of their individual flaws, even Batman being the darker hero, Batman always was somewhat idealistic. That was sort of the draw of the original, the trilogy that Nolan drew, was that Batman was trying to fix things. He was trying to make a better world. He wasn't just going out
trying to make a world where he wasn't needed.
Right, and you don't get that. You get the sense that Batman's just given up on that in this movie. Whereas the great thing about the Nolan trilogy is it had that arc where he got to the point where he wasn't needed. I want to see Batman have ideals still. I want to see Superman have ideals. It's fine if those ideals turn out to be problematic and have repercussions and he has to rethink them, but he needs to have something in him that makes him a hero. You can't reject the idea of heroes in a hero movie like this. We want to believe in Batman. We want to believe in Superman. We want to cheer for these people. And I think even something like Superman American Alien that's going on now, which I haven't read, but I've heard a lot about, where they're taking Superman and kind of making him less idealistic and a little bit more gritty. If you're going to go that direction, at least you go all the way that direction. At least you take him all the way into okay, this is a different iteration of Superman. He's not, pie in the sky and all good and everything. He kind of
that's whenever they decide to give him the red ring and make him evil like 17 different ways.
is he? I don't think he's evil in American Alien. I think
not an American Alien. Like, I'm just talking about what they usually do with him to make him the anti-hero or just the villain straight up.
So I want to see. It feels like they wanted it both ways. They wanted to have the classic Superman and the classic Batman, but they had read all these Elseworld things where Batman was killing people and Superman was turned dark or whatever, and they had gotten that in their head, and they didn't pick one. They tried to just smash it all together and be like, it's Batman and Superman. You guys care, and maybe some of you do, but I didn't.
I'll be interested to see if was any studio meddling here, just because of how big it was. If this is more like, if the script is more on Zack Snyder, like what all happened here. I'm sure we'll be hearing about it for a while. A movie this big can't just like disappear.
I think that obviously the clip show with the Justice League is studio people saying you got to set up the Justice League guys, but there's not actually a lot of that. I mean, you cut out the stuff with the Justice League, and I want to give a shout out to Wonder Woman here, who is not. She doesn't save the movie, okay? The movie, you don't see her and be like, wow, the movie would have sucked if it hadn't been for her. But she, in my opinion, is the best thing in the movie because
it almost seemed like she was rolling her eyes at what the guys were doing.
Well, yeah, and she has fun in that last fight scene. You see her see the fight happening on the television. She's like, oh, I'm down for this. I've been waiting for something like this to happen forever. And she goes back and she just like jumps into it and like halfway grinning through the whole thing. There's a character I can get behind. She's a fighter, man.
Yeah, she took some good hits and would just like took a second to recover, then smiled and ran back in.
And I think part of that's just because she didn't have enough scenes to come off as inconsistent or unreliable. I'm sure once she gets her full, I don't know who's directing her full movie, but hopefully, yeah. Well, I think a lot of this is on Zack Snyder. To go back to your original question, I think a lot of this is Zack Snyder reacting to things in comics and not understanding why he reacted to them. So reacting to things like The Dark Knight and thinking, wow, that's really great. And not understanding that The Dark Knight, and as problematic as that comic even can be, isn't just about a grim and gritty Batman and Superman, that those characters have been through all of the sort of eras of comic books. And not to name the other plot that he draws from comics, but you can't just lift a scene out of a comic out of context and expect us to care when you haven't given us a full movie that makes us really concerned about what's going to happen. I don't want to spoil too much.
Yeah, we're getting into that sort of territory.
Really difficult,
right
but I just feel like that final scene was not earned by the movie at all. If you watch the movie, you'll see what we're talking about.
The very final scene or the final scenes of some of the fights?
No. The thing that happens after the fight.
Okay.
I don't think the movie. I don't think it earned that. I don't think that. I wasn't watching that thinking, "Oh man, wow, that happened." I was thinking, "Well, we're still doing this." I remember. Yeah, I saw that comic once. They definitely did that in the comic. Yep, there's that scene. You took that frame from the comic too. I saw the comic guy. Give me.
They didn't even put the frame that I really wanted to see from that particular comic on there. But that's a different.
I want to ask you, but I don't want to get into specifics. Yeah, but it was just that was the kind of thing that I think beleaguered this whole film. This whole film was, let's take some cool stuff and stick it in a movie, but there's a lot of even individual scenes. That's the problem with these dream sequences, right? The dream sequences are sort of symptomatic of the whole movie. There's a bunch of individual things that work if you just see that one scene, but as a whole experience, as a 2.5-hour movie, it's kind of a failure.
One question about one of the dreams. After he had the post-apocalypse dream and he woke up and it was like a sort of secondary other dream with like the electrical storm, who the hell was that?
That was the Flash.
Was it the Flash?
Yes.
I couldn't tell through all like the
effects and everything. Flash, but it was the Flash.
Okay, I wasn't able to tell.
But in a dream, Tony, because we don't want to actually have the Flash coming back from the future to warn him about a potential bad future.
And the metahumans and everything.
It was a dream within a dream, but not like. Why did he dream that?
I have this is how I would fix the movie. I would take the 30 minutes of Lois Lane cut that out and have it more about the individuals of Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne kind of going in and around each other, like developing that conflict more. Like whenever you actually see them talking at the party and you see that like that Superman's picking up that something's going on just because he has the super hearing, can hear what's going on in Batman's earpiece, just things like that. Like you could, like if you were to add 15 minutes more of them, like just building up in different scenes, like building up the animosity, I feel like you could have made it a lot more effective than Lois Lane.
Also, I got to say, giant no to Batman dropping the ball, not realizing what Lex Luthor was up to.
Yeah.
Like, you're the super detective dude. You're Mr. Ultra Prepared. He wasn't that subtle. You should have known that something was going on.
What if Lex Luthor would have just handed him the kryptonite? Like, what if he would have just protected him with that?
I would have loved to see so many missed opportunities. I would have loved to see, first of all, a Lex Luthor that has a more coherent reason to hate Superman, because I've heard people talk about in the hours since I've seen that movie, Tony, because I saw it last night. I've read a lot about Lex Luthor, and that's one of the complaints people have about the film. Again, I don't think it's Jesse Eisenberg's fault. I feel like it's a poorly written character. But there, many of the reasons given for why he hates Superman seem so interesting and compelling. One of the best ones that I've heard they talked about in the Rotten Tomatoes podcast, where Lex Luthor thinks that Superman holds humanity back because they look at him and they say, oh, look, he's going to save us. And Lex Luthor says, no, you're humanity. You're awesome. You can save yourselves. Stop needing this douchebag from another planet. And so he wants to take Superman down a peg to prove that humanity's... that is a version of Lex Luthor that I would love to see, where you're like, maybe he's right. And then show that in the movie. Show people just standing around being like, yeah, Superman will take care of it, whatever. And getting lackadaisical because Superman's saving the day all the time.
They didn't do that. Being interesting. There's a lot of different ways they could have done that.
But then if you had that version of Lex Luthor and you had him team up with Batman and just come to Batman and say, like, this alien guy's not cool, we need to take him down. And Batman...
Or if he's the one that plants the seed in Batman, that it's wrong, like right after Wayne Tower gets crushed or whatever.
Something would have been good. They didn't go that way. They didn't go a lot of ways that would have been cool, Tony. I didn't like it. I'm fine. I understand that there are going to be people out there who did like it, and I don't hate those people. All right. But other than laughing at how seriously it took itself, I didn't get much enjoyment, and I got a lot of enjoyment out of that, but I didn't get much enjoyment out of this movie.
I think that whenever you're watching movies like this, can get transfixed on small issues, and that pulls you completely out of it. So you start being more critical. Like there were pretty good swaths of time where I found myself just intently watching instead of trying to figure out what was going on that I didn't like. And I feel like a little bit of that happened with you with Star Wars and things like that, where one plot point will just like kind of stick in your head and keep you from enjoying certain aspects of what's happening on the screen. So like if you're able to just kind of like, if you're just there for the enjoyment, not to put a full on critical analysis on it, I think you'll have more fun with this movie. And I'm not talking to Al, I'm talking to the audience. I don't think it's a movie that you should ignore just because of the bad hype. Like maybe watch it in the second run. I think if you're a fan of DC at all, you should go see it in the first run theaters. But it's a pretty cool technical event. I liked it enough that I'm going to recommend it. Al probably won't.
I think you should see it. Okay, at some point. I don't know that you have to see it in the theaters, but this is a movie that people are going to be talking about. And I think if you want to be able to talk about it with people, I mean, you can read all the stuff that happened too if you want to do that. But it's an interesting experience. I know that I've said this, but looking at it, laughing at the movie was a fun experience. Looking at just how bonkers it got, even though I didn't like it, was there's something there that to have what I would consider a failure on this scale is something that kind of just needs to be seen to be believed.
Yeah, and think about what would happen with the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe if they would have done this in like their second or third movie. Like,
I don't know. I mean, I'm still excited for Wonder Woman, though. Or at least I can be still excited for Wonder Woman. I can still be excited for Suicide Squad unless they show me some really stupid trailer. But they showed the Suicide Squad trailer before this, and I was like, I'm still on board with this. And I got out of there, and I was like, I'm still on board with Suicide Squad. I really think it's a Snyder problem. And if they leave Snyder on Justice League, I'm not excited for Justice League at all.
Oh, he's one of the producers, but I don't think he's like you said, he's not the main director on it, so we'll see how that turns out. Let's
I
talk
think-
about the highlight of the movie for you, which occurred before the movie, and that is Lego Batman.
Lego Batman's gonna be awesome. I think that's the version of. Just think about Batman like making stuff in the microwave.
He almost accidentally nukes a lobster for 20 minutes in the microwave. Just dumb
Zack
little
Snyder
things
would
like
have a heart attack putting Batman in a microwave in the same shot,
that.
unless he was hitting somebody over the head with it.
Well, he does go and hit him with a sink.
Believe me, I know. That was so ridiculous. We're in the WWE and we're fighting.
Also, before we end this, I want you guys to go and check out TeePublic. Right now, we are having a sale on these shirts. It ends in about like 6 or 7 hours. $14 for awesome shirts. I know Kevin TV in our audience has one. Al has several. But yeah, they're really good quality shirts. And right now, you can pick them up for $14.
And that is basically all we have to say about Batman v Superman. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Like I said, I think you need to see this movie just to experience it and form your own opinions. Even if you hate it, I mean, the hate that you will have for this movie will be so much fun to share with other people. Because I have just had a blast talking about this movie. And I did have a lot of problems.
Do you put it on the level of Phantom Menace? Like as far as the build up to Let Down? Is it that big? I don't think it's that big. I think that it's like a few more missteps and it would have been that big of a mistake, but it's still going to make money just like the Phantom Menace did. The
Phantom Menace is such a different animal though, because the problem with the Phantom Menace is it didn't have enough darkness. Like they were like, let's make this for kids. Batman Superman, nobody in Warner Brothers ever once uttered the movie, let's make this movie for kids. So that it's such a different level of, wow, that wasn't what I wanted, that I can't compare the two. It's like comparing apples to concrete. Not the same thing.
Not even organic matter. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for us. Go check out humanechoes.com. If you haven't already subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, check out our other awesome stuff. Check out our podcast On the Visit, which came out today. And you guys have an awesome day, and we will talk to you here soon.
And I'm going to hit the end broadcast button in just a second, so let me keep talking while that loads, Tony. There it is.
We got to wait for 15 seconds or so.
Bye, guys.